We'll get the recorder going, and we're looking, of course, to no surprise to you guys, the life of Jacob in somewhat detail. And but we are getting close to the end. But this is really fun for me. Of course, it's always fun for me, but this whole section about the blessings of Jacob to his sons. Just imagine an entire life, a very long life, and the history, the stories that we have read, and the what has occurred in this man's family, and now it's all coming to a point. I wouldn't call it well, it is a conclusive point where he's on a hospice bed. And these are the last words, the last testament of Jacob to his sons, which will inform history for millennia to come, and we are part of that history. So, it's just so much writing on these words here, and I've had a lot of fun looking at it. Today we're going to continue with the second and last week of the second blessing, Simeon and Levi. And it's what makes this unique is that the blessing is to both sons at one time. We've looked at Reuben, and then now we've looked at Simeon and Levi, and we're gonna kind of extrapolate some meaning out of that this morning of what he said. This is review. Remember last week I took these words, and we spent time analyzing the words. Simeon and Levi are brothers, and then the descriptive phrase, their swords are implements of violence, referring to the slaughter at Shechem. Let my soul not enter into their council, let not my glory be united with their assembly. There's this rejection because, reason, in their anger they slew men, and in their self-will, notice anger and self-will are tied right up to violence here. They lamed oxen. Cursed be their anger. Notice cursed be their anger, for it is fierce, and their wrath. Two things they are he's cursing their anger and their wrath for two reasons, because the anger is fierce, their wrath is cruel, and then we end up the final judgment. I think speaking as a mouthpiece of God in a prophetic sense, switching them to the third person, I will disperse them in Jacob and scatter them in Israel. So that's the text we looked at last week. We spent a fair amount of detail on that. And where we went with that was this idea that along with Reuben, Simeon and Levi were born into what I'm calling a deficit framework, and exemplified by their birth mother, Leah, their common birth mother. We're going to read from the text in just a moment. And because of that, there was this need to control. This deficit framework created a need to control, and Levi and Simeon exemplified that, or demonstrated that that need by this fierce, ruthless violence towards Shechem. In my opinion, way out of scope, extremely out of scope, ridiculously out of scope to what the infraction was in Shechem. Well, so we talked about this propensity with human nature to hold on to things, to simmer, actually boil, fume, withhold, and the alternative through Christ, the power that we have in and through Christ, is that we have power to let go. We don't have to respond in these ways because of the power of Christ that dwells within us. We have the power to let go. Although our propensity, human nature-wise, is to hold on and to exert force like these guys did. Maybe not, we do it in a nice Christian kind of way, but still it's the same motivating drive and forces within us. So the alternative, this is all review. The alternative in Christ, we don't have to exemplify anger and self-will, which produces violence, which was in the original slide, but through Christ we have the power to let go, and we put violence on its head, and by expressing love, and that has a restorative and a cohesive nature to it versus a destructive nature, which is our commonly held propensity as human beings. So we build instead of destroy. So there's a lot here that we talked about last week. Well, we're going to take this idea further, and what I'm doing is creating a chart. Now the chart may change a little bit as we move on, but I'm trying to create a common chart and then plug the sons in as we go under common headings to try to get some understanding and some cohesion regarding these blessings. So I've started here, and we've looked at son 1, Reuben, the oldest, and then Simeon and Levi, who are treated as a pair. Their birth context in each case. I'll probably look at that in each of the sons, their birth context. Their common birth mother, Leah, is living out of a deficit perception. Deficit, I know a framework for perception. Deficit meaning in her head, life is not enough. I don't have enough. Deficit. And see 29, 30, 31 through 34. So I'm going to read the text. This is the account of the birth of each of those three sons. It goes like this. And when the Lord saw that Leah was hated, he opened her womb, but Rachel was barren. That's an interesting verse. Verse 32 of chapter 29. And Leah conceived and bore a son, and she called him Reuben. For she said, surely the Lord hath looked upon my affliction, now therefore my husband will love me. Do you get the idea of this deficit? That she felt hated, rejected she was one up, she was second. Rachel was the favored wife. There's real complications if you have two wives, guys. So we don't want to go there. And because she perceived herself as second best, as in this, the text here says hated, she conceived through Jacob, conceived, bore a son, and she said, now my husband will love me. Because I've become fruitful. I have produced something for him. That's in her head. I will be loved. That's what I'm talking about, a deficit framework. I have performed, therefore I should be loved. See, you get the idea. Verse 33, she conceived again and bore a son, and said, because the Lord hath heard that I was hated, he hath therefore given me this son, second son, and I'll call him Simeon, which means hath heard. He or hear, actually it's hear as a command. Hear, husband, hear, Jacob, I've given you a second son, therefore love me. See, that's the idea. The third is in verse, let's see, I want to go to 34. She conceived yet again and bore a son and said, now this time, notice the emotion behind the text. This time My husband will become attached to me, attached, keyword, because I have borne him 3 sons. Now it's not only 1, not only 2, but now 3 sons. So she called him Levi, which means to attach. To attach. So she's working, she's producing fruit. You know, she's going through this whole process, becoming a mom 3 times in order to just cause her husband to love her. That is what I'm talking about as a deficit framework, where the idea, if I work hard, if I produce, if I can just win over the beloved, then now I can get there. Now I can get there. Now I can get. Do you note the frustration that she's going through here? This is a long process, at least 9 months each, with a little bit of rest period. So we're talking about a 3-year period. She's trying to gain the favor of her husband. And so the little call-out box here is a kind of a diagram of this idea. Leah sees, this is Leah's eyes. She sees deficit. She sees deficit. So therefore she lives out a deficit framework. She sees it, she perceives it, so she lives it out. A deficit framework. Trying to win it over, trying to gain favor. Okay, well, we're going to go a little bit more with that in just a minute. Their name meanings, already looked at it. Behold a son. Here, husband. Now I've given you yet a 2nd son. Now my husband will be attached to me because I've given him now a 3rd son. There, now we've switched from the birth mother to the boys, what I'm calling as a heading, life record. Their life record that we have in the text. Well, what we have as their life record is the Bilhah incident where Reuben made a power move as an adult to try to gain dominance within the family setting, and he went in and slept with his father's concubine in order to make that power move. And we've talked in detail about that. The second, I'm grouping these two together because they're grouped in the text right here. These two led the slaughter at Shechem, and we're aware of that. That's their record. That's what the text points to as their record. The slide continues with further categories. I kept that one the same, but then the core idea is the next heading. Reuben demonstrates grasping for more. Again, Leah had the deficit mindset, and it transferred to the boys. Core idea, grasping for more, unbridled violence, a releasing of violence. And I see a correlation between those 2 ideas as exemplified by the 3 boys. And here they are. Here's the commonalities. Number 1, all 3 boys were brought into a world characterized by deficit. Not enough. Not enough. And if you're brought into that framework, naturally you would start thinking, yeah, there's not enough. I mean, it's very common. Is that we as human beings transfer what's been done to us. And if I'm thinking as a parent, there's not enough, if a deficit, it naturally gets transferred to the next generation. Now, what they do with it is up to them, but it's very apparent. Number 2, all 3 demonstrated a deficit operative framework. There's the idea of transference to the next generation. Although they were different in how they demonstrated, and here are the differences. Reuben says not enough, so I must grasp for more. I gotta grasp. I gotta get more. the Simeon and Levi, not enough. So I must exert force over others, exerting force out of this deficit mentality that, there's not enough for me. I've got to exert force. Yes?
I don't think there's any mystical attachment to deficit. I think they just learned the side. I mean, they grew up watching mom hold second place. They grew up knowing, watching mom's Aunt Rachel getting all the attention of mom. And mom, I'm sure, verbalized that a lot of times to the kids.
Oh, I'm sure, yeah.
And I think there's a lot of residual anger towards Jacob. I mean, when you think about it, sleeping with the concubine, that's in your face. And when Jacob confronts Samuel and Levi in the battle with at Shechem, they just kind of got in their father's face and said, "What do you think, we're supposed to just let it happen?"
Right.
I mean,
that comment at the end there.
Yeah, there's a lot of. It didn't just. I know things get passed on somehow through subtleties, but it doesn't have to be so subtle. Have mom make it very clear that.
Oh, I agree.
That Jacob's kind of a stinker.
Yeah, they got issues. We all have our bag of rocks.
Right. And I don't know, but I assume the mothers had the biggest part of raising them up as children more than the dad, so they were under mom's influence a lot.
No doubt. Yeah, when you have this multiple wives and concubines and dad out doing his thing and the infighting and the bickering, all of these things.
And mom being slighted in multiple little ways daily.
Yeah.
Well, slighted from the beginning. She's first married, and after 7 years, she gets pushed aside for Rachel, which Scripture says that's who he really loves.
And she knew it the whole time.
Yeah. She was a bitter woman.
She's trying to gain favor. Well, I don't really blame her.
Hell hath no fury.
Yeah. Yes, Dick.
Just even reading ahead, Leah had like 6 sons.
Yeah.
Even with the 6th one, in chapter 30, verse 19, it says, Leah conceived again and bore Jacob a 6th son. Then Leah said, she's still in deficit here. Then Leah said, God has presented me with a precious gift. This time my husband will treat me with honor because I have borne him a 6th son. So she named him Zebulun.
It's still there. It's still there. Although, I think she had 6 sons. I believe. I can't remember the exact, but next time we're together, we're going to look at the 4th son, which is Judah, within this context. It's verse 35. I read through verse 34, and there's a big change there, and that we'll have some fun with that next time. So here's a graphic of each idea, each of the two that. How the three brothers demonstrated this deficit framework. There's the hand grasping. That's a Reuben grasping for what he already possessed. Remember we talked about that. He was already the firstborn. He was already in line to have that prominence within the family. But in his mind, I don't have enough, so I must grasp for more. I've got to go out and get it. On the other hand, I think that's really a cool picture I found on a search of a hand squishing a head. Simeon and Levi unleashing a violence in order to compensate for the perceived deficit. I don't have enough, so I must exert force over others. Force. Okay, so you have grasping, an open hand grasping, and then you have force. Force, exerting force over others. What are some ways that you can think of? We've seen how it's demonstrated here in the text, in the story, but can you think of some other ways that maybe someone you know or someone very close to you that you don't have to name has demonstrated this in a nice Christian way? What does this look like in our setting?
Sometimes, sadly, in several ways it plays out, especially when you're dealing with things like independent churches. And a pastor is the ultimate CEO, like in a church. And you get a co-pastor or associate pastor who's also very gifted and stuff. Eventually, someone's going to have to leave, and whether the church splits or whether it goes to the blessing or not, but the place isn't big enough for both of them. Generally, if the other person feels like they should have the reins that's been denied, then they'll kind of take it aggressively. They'll say, I've had enough of this preaching heresy. I got a few people here, we're leaving and starting a new church.
Yeah, so, okay, what would we call that? It would be,
Not taking over, but you take some of the people with you, it's sort of a subversive.
how about in the name of God?
Oh, yeah. Someone's doing something that's not tolerated anymore. I'll do everything, but this is
Yeah.
too much, this is over the line, there's always a line.
And it's always based on rightness. You know, I'm right, so therefore, I got to take this.
I can't let this go on.
I can't let this go on. There you go. See, there you're hitting on it. You know, yeah. You know, this whole thing of rightness that we do in the name of God.
Justice.
Justice. There you go. Yeah. Okay, justice. Okay, other things.
Part of God's plan.
What's that?
Part of God's plan. I mean, that's how
Oh.
you say.
Yeah, that where you would say, well, it's God's plan in this.
God
And,
told me.
you know, when we don't have an explanation for it, we tend to put it back on God. That's close to God. God told me to tell you.
God's providence.
All right. Yeah. We were born at night, but not last night, were we? Yeah. Okay. What other things?
I think it gets expressed materially in our culture. You know, I'm not speaking personally here, but, you know, sort of the thing of, I was raised in relative scarcity. And so either for me or for my offspring, I don't ever want them to experience scarcity. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And
So go get more.
what's that?
So go get more.
So, yeah.
Yeah, and God,
I mean,
that
it's tied into capitalism, so to speak, but there's a lot of sort of money there in my mind.
Scholar of hero. If God is my witness, I will not go hungry again.
well, boy, that can have some serious ramifications where we feel like we are obligated to provide a level of provision for our kids. So therefore, we live way beyond our means, our realistic means, through the use of plastic cards, and with the idea, oh, they're doing it, that means I can be doing it too. I mean, there's a tremendous pressure, even more so than when I was a kid, with making sure little Johnny or little Susie has all of the most up-to-date and relevant and important opportunities that are possible today. Thus, you know, it's common that people get on an aircraft on Friday afternoon, they fly to Phoenix for a soccer tournament, the whole family. 12-year-old kids. And, because we're in nationals or we're in quarterly regionals, or, well, who really gives a rip? But anyway, but in reality, but they do.
Scholarship, Mike.
It's the scholar, yes, but okay,
Gotta go to
okay.
college.
Tell me what you think about the scholar. We're doing it because they're going to get a scholar. Okay, what? Tell me about that. What do you think of that?
If they get hurt, it's kind of down the drain.
Yeah.
But yeah, my 12-year-old is on a mission to be on the U.S. soccer team
Yeah.
and go to college.
Yeah.
She just, my ex sold a property she had and told my daughter, we're going to remodel your bathroom. Your bedrooms is about this small and make a whole new beautiful bedroom. And And my daughter said, I want all that money to go into my soccer training. She took $6,000 and put it in the bank.
Well, wow.
So,
Yeah.
that's what I said, put the brakes on.
Yeah. Well, I've said too much already, but you know, I scratch my head. You know, I do. There is a driving force that our kids get, that we're obligated.
Then,
Yeah, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, and then along comes Jesus. How freeing he is to our lives. We make things so complicated. And, boy, we just keep struggling with that. Get more and more, this, that.
It-
That, you know, Jesus, whole different framework.
Yeah, if we believe him. Yeah, go ahead.
One of my favorite isms, back on what you said, in discussions and studies, I will sometimes come to the conclusion and state, you know, if there is one thing that the church has done consistently well from the beginning, it's to complicate God's truth. That's one thing we've been very, very good at, which goes back to your point. But the thing, Mike, that I wanted to mention,
Yeah.
using a broad brush to define deficit,
Yeah.
one of the most tragic examples of that not having enough is the father who comes from a deficit disorder type thing, and because he believes that he's not adequate, or he's not complete, or he's weak, or whatever, he will take out that frustration on his children with ungodly discipline.
There you go.
And the cycle continues. Then those kids come out with the same perception of themselves. They've always been yelled at, screamed at, beat, or whatever, so there they are, now they're in a deficit disorder.
Yeah.
Until Jesus comes along. And I think we probably have all in our lives encountered families or men where we've seen Jesus come in and heal those situations, and it's incredible what happens.
It is. Yeah.
And it's equally tragic when it doesn't. You see what's going on.
Yeah. You know, it seems though that for that to happen, we're talking about Jesus coming in. Of course, he's always there, but you know what I mean. There has to be a bottoming out experience, because my experience where I was in this is I see very little difference between church people and unchurched, Christian and not, is that I see it all around that, and I'm not exempt, that there's still not enough. In other words, I have Jesus, and the next slide, for instance, because of time, which of the two can you most relate to? Well, I asked myself that question. As a believer, Carl, I've been a believer a long time, but I can't say, and I became a believer when I was 19 years old, but I've lived a good chunk of my life still trying to eat out of deficit. Now, my deficit, I looked at those two and I said, if I had to choose, I would say I'm more this way. That I'm not so much grasping for more things. I'm just not drawn to things that much. I like a few things, but I don't need to drive the latest car or live in the biggest. I just don't need a lot. I don't, I've got gift certificates on my desk that are, that are there for a long time because I just don't need anything. But here, so that kind of default, I go to here and I go, well, how do I exemplify this deficit idea? And I'd say I've learned to do it very polishedly, in a Christian kind of way, where my voice will change, and I'll go, Bill. I've never done that to Bill, but my wife knows that, where I will change my voice and tone, where I am internally pissed off, and I can do it in a nice Christian kind of way. And although my wife sees right through it, she says, "There's your voice again." Well, and trying to control my environment through. Okay, I'm probably not unguilty. I have probably manipulated people. Yeah, I will say that. Why is it? Because I don't have the trust in God that He's big enough to take care of the situation. See, there it is. There's the deficit. Yes.
I think
One more
that's-
comment.
the second one's really dominant. I think there's something inside of us that just loves to deal with people's lives and loves to be a pundit or have an authority voice. And
Yeah.
a lot of times people, whether it's on the internet or on public comments and stuff, some say,
Yeah.
we can trust the guy because he's not in it for the money.
Yeah.
I go, baloney, he's in it for the influence. That has more
There you go.
satisfaction
Yeah.
than anything else
Yeah.
that influence people.
And they're both the same.
Yeah, they might get money as a
Yeah.
result, but I mean,
Yeah.
influencing people is a huge
Yeah.
apple to bite out.
Yeah. I will say like this, I'm 63 and I've learned to be a lot more cautious. Asking people to do things, just a lot more. I understand the weight of what that is a lot more these days. So I think there's been some good work inside of me, and there's been some good work inside of you. But it hovers around us, this deficit. Even with Jesus, is God really enough? Is God really enough? What do I need changed in and around me? Or what do I need changed for me to be happy? If the answer to that question is nothing, that's a great answer. See you in, we're going to meet, you guys are going to meet next week. And Bob has the key. And, next time, as I said, we're going to look at Leah's fourth son, Dick, who is Judah. And something changes. And as Dick has already read, it's temporary, but at least there's a change going on with the name Judah. And we'll look at that next week, or in 3 weeks, in context to what we just looked at today. So have a good rest of the week.
Bless the restaurant.
We have the first show.